The grand hall of the celestial spire shimmered with cold, opulent light. It was a place of refined power, where the air itself seemed to hold its breath in deference to the ruling house. At its center, upon a throne of living crystal, sat the princess. Her silver skin caught the light, and her eyes, large and amethyst, surveyed the court with amused detachment. Before her stood a Lorian ambassador, his feathered crest trembling with earnest emphasis. Highness. The legends are consistent across a dozen fringe sectors, the ambassador insisted, his vocalizer buzzing with anxiety. They speak of a species from a world of violent tectonics and predatory evolution. They call themselves humans. It is said they do not break in captivity, that they can endure pain that would shatter a mind, that in combat they become something other. A ripple of delicate laughter escaped the princess. It was a sound like chiming bells, and the courtiers echoed it politely. Legends, she said, the word flavored with gentle mockery. The stories frightened nursemaids tell their hatchlings. A species that thrives on chaos? That finds strength in adversity? It is a biological absurdity. Order is strength. Control is power. What you describe are the exaggerated tales of a primitive people, clinging to a myth of feared savagery because they have no true civilization to boast of. She gestured with a slender hand, the gesture dismissing not just the ambassador's warning, but the very concept. Their supposed ferocity is merely the uncontrolled thrashing of a lesser being. In a universe of plasma lances and gravitic harmonics, what use is? Brute force? She smiled, a perfect curve of her lips. Let them have their legends. We have reality. That reality, for the princess, was one of uncontested dominion. Her people, the Alara, had forged an empire through superior technology, elegant logic, and an unwavering belief in their own cultivated perfection. Military confrontations were swift. Clinical affairs decided long before any vessel came into visual range. The idea of a close-quarters combatant, a single being whose presence could alter a battle's outcome, was not just archaic. It was distasteful. Weeks later, the taste in the princess's mouth was bitter and metallic. Reality had become a shrieking alarm. A renegade faction, the Kavith, had launched a daring and illogical assault on the spire itself. Their tactics were crude, relying on overwhelming numbers and a suicidal disregard for their own vessels. Ilaran defensive grids, designed to dismantle sophisticated attacks, were overwhelmed by the sheer, chaotic volume of the assault. The spire was breached. The luminous halls became a labyrinth of flickering emergency lights and the sharp ozone smell of scorched metal. The refined sounds of courtly music were replaced by the percussive thump of distant explosions and the high-pitched whine of handheld energy casters. The princess, hurried by her last remaining guards through a service corridor towards the royal hangar, felt a cold fear that was entirely new to her. It was the fear of the unpredictable, of the messy. They rounded a corner and found their path blocked. A Kavith boarding party, 6 of them, their chitinous armor scarred and dripping with hydraulic fluid, leveled their heavy rifles. The lead guard fired, his energy bolt searing a hole in the ceiling as a Kavith projectile took him in the throat. The remaining 2 guards pushed the princess behind a fallen structural beam, returning fire with desperate precision. But the odds were crystalline. They were tacticians in a brawl. Then, from a cross-ventilation duct high on the wall, something fell. It was not a graceful descent. It was a controlled crash, a jarring impact that shook the deck plates. The Kavith swung their weapons towards the new threat. The princess peered over the beam, her amethyst eyes wide. The figure straightened. It was bipedal, roughly Ilaran in shape, but utterly wrong. It was clad in a sealed, non-reflective combat suit, scarred and pitted. The helmet was a blank, dark visor. It carried no rifle, only a long matte black blade in one hand and a compact, blocky sidearm in the other. It stood between the princess and the Kavith, and it did not speak. The Kavith leader barked a guttural order, and fire converged. Energy bolts and projectiles filled the corridor. The figure moved. It was not the fluid, efficient motion of Alaran combat drills. It was something else entirely. It was a violent, economical poetry. It dropped, rolled forward, not away from the fire, but through a gap in their targeting, coming up inside the effective range of their longer weapons. The blade flashed, not with energy, but with applied force, shearing through a rifle barrel and the limb holding it. The sidearm barked, a sharp physical sound, twice. 2 Kavith fell, neat holes in their armor. It was fast, but not preternaturally so. What struck the princess was its absolute lack of hesitation. There was no pause to consider, no moment of assessment. It perceived, and it acted. When a Kavith soldier lunged with a vibro blade, the figure parried with its own, the clash a screech of metal, and used the opponent's momentum to slam him into the wall with a sickening crunch. When another tried to flank, the figure pivoted and fired, the shot impacting a weak point at the joint of the armor. It used everything. The walls, the low ceiling, the fallen debris. It kicked a discharged power cell from a fallen guard's weapon into the face of a Kavith, blinding it for the half-second needed to close the distance. It was not fighting 6 opponents. It was fighting 6 consecutive battles, each one ended with brutal, decisive finality. The last Kavith, the leader, fired its entire plasma cartridge. The figure dove sideways, the searing bolt missing by a hand's breadth and melting a section of the wall. Before the Kavith could recharge, the figure was on it. It did not use the blade. It dropped the sidearm, grasped the weapon's barrel, and wrenched it upward, forcing the muzzle under the Kavith's own jaw. A single close-range shot ended the fight. Silence rushed back into the corridor, now thick with the smells of ionized air, spent propellant, and organic distress. The figure stood amidst the fallen, its chest rising and falling in a steady, measured rhythm. It turned its blank visor towards the 2 stunned Ilaran guards, then to the princess. Slowly, it reached up and released the seals on its helmet with a hiss of equalizing pressure. It removed the helmet, tucking it under an arm. The face beneath was human. It was streaked with grime and sweat, features set in an expression of weary focus. The hair was dark and cropped short. The eyes, a shade of brown that seemed to absorb the emergency light, scanned the corridor, then settled on the princess. There was no triumph in that gaze, no pride, only a sharp, living alertness. One of the guards, his hand trembling on his caster, found his voice. "Identify yourself." The human's voice was calm, slightly rough. "Sergeant. Allied Response Corps. Your distress call had a general override. We were closest." The princess found she could not speak. The legends she had laughed at were standing before her, breathing her air. There was no mythic rage, no bestial roar, just a profound, unsettling capability. This was not mindless brutality. This was something far more terrifying. Applied, intelligent violence, honed to a razor's edge. Every movement in the fight had been a choice, the most direct and effective path to an end. It was efficiency stripped of all artistry, all ceremony. The human knelt by the fallen lead guard, checking for a pulse. Finding none, it gave a slight, almost imperceptible shake of its head and stood. "This route is compromised," it stated. "The hangar you're heading for is already contested. I have a different path. You expect us to follow you?" The remaining guard asked, his voice thin. The human looked at him, then at the princess. "I expect you wish to live. The choice is operational, not personal." The princess finally unlocked her throat. "The legends? They said you do not break. The human sergeant considered this as another distant explosion shuddered through the spire. Breaking is a luxury, Highness, one we rarely can afford. Please, decision time. They followed. The human moved with a predator's awareness, pausing at intersections, listening to sounds the Alarans could not discern. It led them through maintenance shafts and coolant tunnels, places the pristine architecture of the spire tried to hide. Twice more they encountered cave-ith patrols. Twice more the sergeant engaged. The princess watched, no longer with terror, but with a dreadful, captivated clarity. She saw how the human used sound and shadow as weapons. She saw it take a glancing hit from an energy blast on the armored shoulder, shrug off the impact that would have shattered an Alaran bone, and return fire without a flinch. She saw it finish a fight with a cave-ith soldier in a grappling hold that ended with a precise wrenching twist. It was not fighting to duel. It was fighting to eliminate. Finally, they emerged into a secondary hangar where a small blocky vessel of unfamiliar design sat, its ramp lowered. Its engines were humming at idle. The human pointed. That's your ride. Crew is inside. They will get you to the command ship. The guard hurried forward. The princess hesitated, turning to the sergeant, who was already checking the power cell of his sidearm. You are not coming? My squad is still conducting sweep and clear. My task was your retrieval. Task is complete. The amethyst eyes, once full of amused certainty, now searched the human's weary, dirt-smudged face. The laughter that had chimed in the grand hall was a memory from another lifetime. Your combat. It is not what I imagined from the stories. The human gave a short, humorless exhale, the ghost of a smile.